Blood pooled on the mahogany floor, inching toward Teresa's scuffed boots. She looked up at the most feared man in Chicago and trembled, but her voice held steady. "Can you pretend to be my husband?" she asked. Alessio Bianchi wiped a blood-soaked knife, his dark eyes locking on to hers. Forever. The rain in Chicago did not wash away the sins of the city. It only made them slicker. Teresa Serra hurried down the narrow alleyway behind the meatpacking district, her heavy breath forming white clouds in the freezing October air. She clutched her drenched coat tightly around her plush, curved figure, the wet fabric clinging to her wide hips and full bust. Under normal circumstances, Teresa was a woman who took up space unapologetically, carrying her plus-sized frame with a quiet, undeniable dignity. But tonight, she was hunted. Tonight, taking up space meant she was a larger target for the men trailing her. Preston Marsh was looking for her, and Preston Marsh did not leave loose ends. Preston was the chief enforcer and fixer for the O'Connor Syndicate, a brutal Irish mob that controlled the northern docks. He was a sadist disguised in a bespoke suit, a man who enjoyed the slow destruction of his enemies. Teresa was never supposed to be on his radar. She was a forensic accountant, a civilian who operated in the grey areas of the underworld. She audited the books for minor gambling rings and strip clubs, making sure the numbers balanced so the IRS stayed away. She was brilliant, blessed with an eidetic memory and a relentless resilience that kept her afloat in a world of monsters. But 3 days ago, a low-level O'Connor captain had forced her to clean up a messy ledger. Buried in the fake invoices, Teresa found the money trail. Preston Marsh was skimming millions from his own boss and funneling it into an offshore account in the Caymans. When Preston found out she had seen the unredacted files, he didn't try to buy her silence. He sent a hit squad to her apartment. She had barely escaped through the fire escape, using her sharp mind to outmaneuver them, leaving behind everything she owned. For 3 days, she had survived on the streets, using burner phones and sleeping in abandoned subway terminals. But she was exhausted. Her body ached, her feet were bleeding, and she knew Preston was closing the net. There was only one way out. She had to invoke the oldest, most unbreakable law of the Chicago underworld. She needed the protection of a Don. Not just any Don, but the only man powerful enough to make Preston Marsh back down. Alessio Bianchi, head of the Bianchi crime family. Alessio was a phantom of violence and absolute power. He controlled the South Side and the financial districts with an iron grip. He was ruthless, a man who had murdered his way to the top of the syndicate by his 25th birthday. He was not a man who took pity on strays. But Teresa had a bargaining chip. She reached the heavy, reinforced steel doors of the Obsidian Club, Alessio's primary stronghold. 2 massive men in dark suits stepped into her path, their hands hovering over their holstered weapons. Teresa stopped, forcing her spine straight despite her trembling legs. She pushed her soaked hair out of her eyes. "Tell Alessio Bianchi that Teresa Serra is here," she said, her voice projecting a confidence she did not feel. "Tell him I have the routing numbers for Preston Marsh's stolen millions, and I want a trade." The guards laughed, a harsh, grating sound. One of them stepped forward, looking her up and down with a sneer, taking in her soaked clothes and soft, rounded figure. "You think the boss wants to see a soaked pig like you? Get lost before we make you disappear." Teresa did not flinch. She had spent her entire life being underestimated because of her weight, treated as if her soft exterior meant she had a soft mind. She stepped closer to the gun barrel, her dark eyes flashing with a hidden, furious strength. I am the only person alive who can hand your boss the O'Connor territory on a silver platter. If you send me away, Alessio will eventually find out. And when he realizes you cost him $10 million and the docks, he will peel the skin from your bones. The guard hesitated, his sneer faltering. He pulled a radio from his lapel and muttered into it. A long, agonizing minute passed. Finally, the heavy steel doors buzzed and unlatched. They led her through the opulent, dimly lit club, down a winding staircase, and into a soundproof basement office. The air smelled of expensive cigars, old leather, and a sharp, metallic tang that made Teresa's stomach twist. Blood. Alessio Bianchi stood by a massive oak desk. He was a terrifyingly beautiful man, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of a starless sky. He wore a crisp white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in intricate, dark tattoos. In his right hand, he held a hunting knife. On the floor, a man was groaning, clutching a bleeding hand. Alessio calmly wiped the blood from the blade using a silk handkerchief. He dismissed his men with a subtle flick of his chin. The guards dragged the bleeding man out of the room, leaving Teresa alone with the apex predator of the city. Alessio slowly turned his gaze to her. He did not look at her with the disgust or dismissal she usually received from men in this life. His dark eyes swept over her body, taking in her full hips, her heavy breasts, the curve of her thighs. It was a look of intense, consuming calculation. "Teresa Serra," he said, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "The brilliant auditor who sees ghosts in the ledgers. You look like you have had a rough week." "Preston Marsh is trying to kill me," Teresa said, refusing to let her voice shake. "I found his skim. I have the account numbers memorized. He stole 10 million from his own family. You can use this to fracture the O'Connor syndicate. I will give you all of it." "And in return?" Alessio asked, taking a slow step toward her like a wolf stalking a deer. "I need your protection. I need you to claim me," Teresa breathed out. "Syndicate law dictates that the wife of a Don is strictly off limits. If Preston touches your wife, the Commission will sanction the total annihilation of the O'Connors. It is the only way he will call off the hit." She swallowed hard, looking down at the blood on the mahogany floor, then back up at his handsome, terrifying face. "Can you pretend to be my husband?" she asked. Alessio stopped inches from her. She could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell the intoxicating scent of bergamot, gunpowder, and raw masculinity. He reached out, his large, scarred hand gently tracing the curve of her wet cheek, his thumb brushing over her trembling lower lip. His touch was unexpectedly soft, a shocking contrast to the violence he had just committed. "I do not pretend, Teresa," Alessio said softly. He leaned in, his mouth hovering just an inch from her ear, his breath sending a shiver down her spine. "I have watched you for 2 years. I watched you walk into those filthy dens of thieves and outsmart them all. I watched you carry yourself like a queen among rats. I will protect you. I will slaughter Preston Marsh and anyone else who dares to look at you. But this will not be a fake marriage. You will wear my ring, you will live in my home, and you will belong to me." Teresa stared at him, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. He had been watching her. This ruthless, untouchable king of the underworld had been tracking a plus-sized accountant for 2 years? She searched his dark eyes and found no deception, only a terrifying, possessive obsession. "Do we have a deal, little bird?" Alessio asked. Teresa knew she was trading one monster for another. But as she looked at Alessio, she realized that this monster wanted to keep her safe. "Yes," she whispered. Alessio's lips curved into a dark, triumphant smile. "Forever," he replied. The wedding took place less than 24 hours later. There were no white gowns, no flowers, and no cheering families. It was held in a private, dimly lit chapel in the basement of a cathedral controlled by the Bianchi family. Teresa wore a dark velvet dress that Alessio had provided. It fit her perfectly, hugging every plush curve and soft line of her body, leaving her to wonder how he knew her exact measurements. As they stood before the corrupt priest, Alessio held her hand. His grip was firm, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a continuous, soothing rhythm. When he slid the heavy diamond band onto her finger, the cold weight of the stone felt like a shackle, but also an impenetrable shield. Alessio kissed her cheek, his lips lingering against her skin. "You are safe now," he murmured. "You are a Bianchi." They moved to his heavily fortified compound in the Gold Coast neighborhood, a sprawling man surrounded by high walls and armed guards. Teresa assumed she would be placed in a guest wing, hidden away until the conflict with Preston Marsh was resolved. But when Alessio led her up the grand staircase, he took her directly into his master suite. It was a massive room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, dominated by a huge king-sized bed. "I thought we would sleep in separate rooms," Teresa said, crossing her arms defensively over her chest. Suddenly painfully aware of her size in this grand, luxurious space, Alessio unbuttoned his suit jacket and tossed it onto a velvet chair. "My men need to believe this is a real marriage. The O'Connors need to believe it. And more importantly, I need to believe it. You share my bed, Teresa. I will not push you beyond what you are ready for, but you will not hide from me." The first few days in the compound were a tense dance of boundaries. Teresa was not used to being pampered, nor was she used to the intense, suffocating gaze of a man like Alessio. He watched her constantly. When she sat in the library, poring over the financial data she had promised him, he would stand in the doorway, just looking at her. He made sure she ate, replacing the sparse, rushed meals she was used to with rich, decadent Italian dishes prepared by his personal chef. When she expressed insecurity about her body, attempting to cover herself with bulky sweaters, Alessio would gently but firmly peel the layers away, his eyes tracing her thick thighs and round stomach with dark reverence. "You have the body of a Renaissance goddess," he told her one evening, his large hands resting on her wide hips. "Never hide yourself in my house. You are magnificent." Teresa felt something shifting inside her. The fear was fading, replaced by a strange, dark warmth. She was beginning to realize that Alessio's obsession was not just about control. It was an absolute, all-consuming devotion. But outside the walls of their gilded cage, a war was brewing. Preston Marsh was not a man to accept defeat. When the news of the marriage reached the O'Connor syndicate, the underworld held its breath. Syndicate rules were absolute. Alessio's wife was untouchable. To strike at her was to declare an all-out war. Most capos would have backed down, knowing that Alessio Bianchi commanded a small army of heavily armed soldiers. But Preston was desperate. Without the $10 million, his own boss would soon discover his treason. He needed to silence Teresa before Alessio could decode and verify the offshore accounts. On their 5th day of marriage, the silence was shattered. Teresa was in the kitchen, brewing a cup of tea, when the front gates of the compound echoed with a massive explosion. The sound shook the foundation of the mansion, shattering the kitchen windows. Teresa screamed, throwing her arms over her head as glass rained down around her. Within seconds, Alessio was there. He burst into the kitchen, a customized assault rifle in his hands, his face a mask of absolute fury. He grabbed Teresa, hauling her up from the floor, his eyes frantically scanning her body for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he roared over the sound of blaring alarms and distant gunfire. "No, I am fine," Teresa gasped, her heart pounding. The glass missed me. Alessio pulled her tightly against his chest, pressing a hard, desperate kiss to her forehead. "Stay in the safe room. Do not come out until I open the door. Do you understand me?" "What is happening?" she cried. "Preston Marsh just made the biggest mistake of his miserable life," Alessio snarled, his eyes dark with murderous intent. "He just tried to touch what is mine." Alessio shoved her into the hidden panic room behind the library and locked the heavy steel door. For 2 hours, Teresa sat in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of automatic gunfire and shouting. She did not cower. Instead, she opened the secure laptop Alessio had given her. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. If Preston was attacking the compound, it meant he had exhausted his resources. It meant he was desperate. Teresa hacked into the city's traffic grid and cross-referenced it with the O'Connor Syndicate's known safe houses. She tracked the license plates of the vehicles that had detonated at the gate. By the time the gunfire ceased and the heavy door of the safe room swung open, Teresa had found him. Alessio stood in the doorway. He was covered in soot and blood, his white shirt torn, a shallow cut bleeding above his eyebrow. He looked like a demon dragged straight from hell. He dropped his rifle and crossed the room, pulling her into a bone-crushing embrace. "They are dead," Alessio whispered into her hair. "Every single man he sent. They are dead. And now I am going to find Preston and peel him apart piece by piece." Teresa did not shrink away from the blood on his clothes. She looked up at her ruthless husband, her own eyes hardening into obsidian. She reached out, her soft fingers touching his blood-stained cheek. "You don't have to look for him, Alessio," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I know exactly where he is hiding." Alessio looked at the laptop screen glowing behind her, then back at his wife. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face, a mixture of dark pride and total adoration. He kissed her deeply, a brutal, passionate claim that tasted of copper and ash. "My beautiful, brilliant queen," he murmured against her lips. "Let's go hunt." The Chicago skyline was a jagged silhouette against the bruised purple clouds of the impending dawn. Inside the reinforced cabin of Alessio's armored SUV, the silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the tires on wet asphalt and the soft, rapid clicking of Teresa's fingers on her encrypted keyboard. She sat beside the most dangerous man in the city, her soft, rounded figure swallowed by a tactical Kevlar vest he had insisted she wear. Preston Marsh had retreated to an abandoned shipyard on the Calumet River, a sprawling maze of rusted shipping containers and decaying warehouses. It was a fortress of rusted steel, a place where men went to disappear or to die. Alessio sat across from her, loading a fresh magazine into his sidearm. His white shirt was still stained with the blood of the men who had attacked their home. His dark eyes never left Teresa. Most women would be in shock, weeping or trembling after a siege. But his wife was staring at a glowing screen, calculating the structural weaknesses of an industrial compound with the cold precision of a military tactician. "I has 20 men left, tops," Teresa said, her voice steady, cutting through the tension in the vehicle. "They are stationed at the main gate and the eastern loading docks. But there is an old subterranean drainage tunnel that connects to the river. It was sealed off in the 90s, but the city blueprints show the structural integrity is compromised. A small explosive charge will open it. You can bypass his perimeter entirely." Alessio smiled, a terrifying, carnivorous expression. He tapped the partition glass, signaling his lead enforcer in the front seat. "You heard the lady. Reroute the strike teams to the river." When the convoy killed its headlights and rolled to a stop near the muddy banks of the Calumet, Alessio turned to Teresa. He unbuckled his tactical rig and reached out, pulling her gently against his chest. His large hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You stay in the vehicle with my personal guard," he commanded softly. "This will be violent, Teresa. I do not want you exposed to the crossfire." "No," Teresa replied, her chin lifting in defiance. "Preston knows I am the only one who can decrypt the offshore files. If he thinks I am not with you, he might trigger a dead man switch and wipe the servers. I need to be in the server room when you take him down. I am not staying behind, Alessio." For a long moment, Alessio stared down at her. He saw the iron will beneath her soft exterior, the brilliant fire that made her untouchable. He did not argue. He simply nodded once, handed her a compact pistol, and kissed her hard. "Then stay behind me." The infiltration was swift and merciless. Alessio and his strike team moved through the subterranean tunnels like phantoms. When they blew the rusted grate and breached the warehouse basement, chaos erupted. The air filled with the deafening roar of automatic gunfire, the acrid smell of cordite, and the shouts of dying men. Teresa stayed close to Alessio's back, her heart hammering against her ribs, but she kept her eyes fixed on the blueprints illuminating her tablet screen. Up the stairs to the right, she directed him over the noise. Alessio was a force of nature, a lethal apex predator, clearing the path with ruthless efficiency. They reached the second-floor control room, kicking open the heavy metal door. Preston Marsh stood by a bank of servers, his bespoke suit ruined, his face pale with panic. He was holding a heavy revolver, pointing it erratically toward the doorway. Two of his remaining bodyguards raised their weapons, but Alessio shot them before they could even blink, leaving Preston entirely alone. "Drop it," Alessio commanded, his voice a low, vibrating growl that promised unimaginable agony. Preston laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. He pressed the barrel of his revolver against the main server tower. "If you shoot me, Bianchi, my blood will short this rig. The decryption keys will fry. You lose the 10 million, and the O'Connors will still come for you." "And for what?" "For this fat bitch." Alessio's eyes went black. He raised his weapon, aiming straight for Preston's head. "Wait," Teresa said, stepping out from behind Alessio's broad frame. She lowered her tablet, a calm, chilling smile spreading across her plush lips. Preston sneered at her, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You think you are so smart, you overgrown pig. You think marrying a Don makes you safe? You are nothing but a calculator." Teresa walked forward, ignoring Alessio's tense warning. She stopped 10 feet from Preston, standing tall, completely unashamed of the space she occupied. "You are right, Preston. I am a calculator, Teresa said, her voice echoing in the cavernous room, which is why I did not come here to stop you from wiping those servers. I came here to watch your face when you realize they are already empty. Preston froze. What are you talking about? While we were sitting in the armored car, I bypassed your local network using the back door I installed in your ledger 3 days ago, Teresa explained, her tone dripping with calm authority. I drained the Cayman's account. The $10 million is currently sitting in a secure holding fund controlled by the Bianchi family. Preston's face drained of all color. You are bluffing. I never bluff, Teresa said. But that is not the best part. I did not just take the money, Preston. I took the transaction history. Every single unredacted file proving you skimmed from your own boss. And 5 minutes ago, I forwarded that entire dossier directly to the private email of Declan O'Connor. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. Preston's hand began to shake violently. You see, Teresa continued, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with a dark, vengeful light. 3 years ago, a low-level O'Connor captain ordered a hit on a deli owner in the West Loop because he refused to pay protection money. That man was my father. You gave the order, Preston. You ruined my family. Alessio lowered his weapon marginally, turning to look at his wife. The revelation hung in the air, electric and sharp. I did not stumble onto your skim by accident, Teresa said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I spent 3 years working my way into the syndicates, auditing ledgers for scum like you, just waiting to find the one thread that would unravel your life. I planted the initial discrepancy. I let your men chase me. I knew the only way to destroy you completely, to make you bleed the way my father bled, was to bring the devil straight to your doorstep. She turned her gaze to Alessio. I used you, she confessed to her husband, her dark eyes searching his face. I manipulated the board so you would protect me and dismantle his empire. Preston saw his opening. He raised his gun toward Teresa, screaming in sheer panic and rage. Before Preston could pull the trigger, Alessio moved. He crossed the room in a blur of violence, slapping the gun away and driving his hunting knife deep into Preston's shoulder, pinning him against the metal server rack. Preston shrieked in agony, dropping to his knees as Alessio twisted the blade. Alessio leaned down, his face inches from Preston's sweating, terrified visage. Did you hear her, you worthless piece of trash? Alessio whispered, his voice laced with a terrifying, reverent pride. She orchestrated your death, and you never even saw her coming. Alessio withdrew his sidearm and pressed it to Preston's chest. Declan O'Connor sends his regards, he said coldly, and pulled the trigger. The storm broke as they drove back to the Gold Coast compound, washing the blood and soot from the streets of Chicago. The war was over before it had truly begun. Declan O'Connor, furious over Preston's betrayal, had personally called Alessio's secure line to declare a truce, officially recognizing Teresa as a protected member of the Bianchi family. When they walked through the heavy wooden doors of the mansion, the compound was silent. The staff had cleaned the shattered glass from the earlier attack, leaving the estate in pristine condition. Teresa stood in the center of the grand foyer, her heavy coat dripping water onto the marble floor. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was rapidly fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a creeping sense of dread. She had secured her revenge, but she had also confessed to manipulating the most ruthless mafia boss in America. Alessio stripped off his ruined tactical vest and tossed it aside. He walked slowly toward her, His face was unreadable, a mask of aristocratic stone. Teresa braced herself. "I understand if you want to annul the arrangement," she said. Her voice barely above a whisper. "I gave you the money, and the O'Connors are neutralized. You got what you wanted out of this, and I got my revenge. You can let me go now." Alessio stopped directly in front of her. He reached out, sliding his large hands under her wet coat, pushing it off her shoulders so it fell in a heap on the floor. He stepped closer, crowding her into his space, forcing her to look up into his fathomless dark eyes. "Let you go," he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. Teresa swallowed hard. "I used you, Alessio. I manipulated you into this marriage, so I could use your army to kill the man who murdered my father. I played you." Alessio's hands moved to her waist, his long fingers gripping her wide hips with bruising, possessive force. He suddenly laughed, a deep, rich sound that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "You think I am angry?" Alessio asked, shaking his head. "Teresa, I live in a world surrounded by men who solve their problems with brute force and sheer idiocy. And then you walk into my life. A woman with a mind so sharp, she dismantled a rival syndicate and manipulated a don without firing a single shot." He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. "Do you have any idea how intoxicating you are?" he murmured. "You are a genius, Teresa. You are ruthless, brilliant, and completely unyielding. You did not play me, little bird. You proved to me that you are exactly the queen I need by my side." Teresa felt a sudden, burning heat flush through her chest. "You are not furious." "I am obsessed," Alessio corrected, his lips brushing against hers. "I told you I do not pretend. This marriage was never a fake arrangement for me. From the moment you walked into my office and threatened my men, you were mine." He swept her off her feet, cradling her plush figure against his chest, effortlessly. Teresa gasped, her arms instinctively wrapping around his broad shoulders. He carried her up the grand staircase, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet house. When they reached the master suite, he gently set her down by the edge of the massive bed. The city lights of Chicago glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the room. Alessio stepped back and slowly unbuttoned his ruined shirt, exposing the dark, intricate tattoos that sprawled across his muscular chest. He reached for her, his hands reverent and slow. He undressed her with careful precision, tossing the tactical gear and her heavy clothes to the floor until she stood before him in nothing but the pale moonlight. Teresa crossed her arms, a sudden wave of vulnerability washing over her. Even after everything she had accomplished tonight, the deep-seated insecurities about her body lingered. Alessio gently grasped her wrists and pulled her arms away. "Do not cover yourself," he commanded softly. He dropped to his knees before her. Teresa's breath hitched as he pressed his face to her soft, round stomach, his lips trailing hot kisses over her skin. His hands mapped the heavy curves of her thighs and the flare of her wide hips, treating her body like holy ground. He worshipped her with a terrifying, consuming devotion, proving with every touch that he did not just desire her mind, but he was entirely captivated by her physical form. "You are perfection," he whispered against her skin, making her tremble. "Every inch of you belongs to me, and I will spend the rest of my life worshipping you." Teresa looked down at the ruthless monster, kneeling at her feet, yielding his total power to her. The fear was entirely gone, replaced by a fierce, burning love for the man who saw her true worth. She ran her fingers through his thick, dark hair, pulling him up so she could crash her lips against his. The kiss was desperate, tasting of danger and absolute surrender. They tumbled onto the bed, tangling in the silk sheets. In the darkness of the room, surrounded by the towering skyline of the city they now ruled together, Alessio showed her what it meant to be loved by a demon. It was chaotic, possessive, and beautifully tender. Hours later, as the morning sun began to bleed over the waters of Lake Michigan, Teresa lay resting against Alessio's chest, tracing the scars on his skin. His arm was wrapped securely around her waist, keeping her anchored to him. "They will come for us eventually," Teresa whispered into the quiet room. "Other families, rivals. When they realize how much power you consolidated tonight." Alessio tightened his grip around her, pressing a lingering kiss to the crown of her head. "Let them come. They have no idea what they are up against. I have the guns, but you, my beautiful wife, have the board. We will crush them all." Teresa smiled, feeling the heavy diamond ring cold against her skin. She was no longer a hunted accountant running through the rain. She was Teresa Bianchi. "Can you promise me something?" she asked softly, looking up at him. "Anything," he replied instantly. "Promise me we never hide in the shadows again," she said. Alessio looked at her, his dark eyes filled with absolute, unwavering devotion. He pulled her flush against his side, cementing her place as the queen of his empire. "Forever," he swore. "Did you love this dark, high-stakes mafia romance? The twisted revenge, the unexpected brilliance of our plus-sized queen, and the relentless devotion of Alessio Bianchi. Make this a story to remember. If you want to see more thrilling underworld dramas, forbidden love stories, and gripping revenge plots, please hit that like button and share this video with your friends. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite plot twist, and do not forget to subscribe for more captivating tales.